Welcome to ELR-Precision. I'm Michael Steele, and today we're talking a little bit about reloading. Specifically, how to find your seating depth. Because I was at a buddy's place the other day, and we were talking about reloading. He's relatively new to the reloading, and he was adamant that the distance or the measurement that we were interested in was the length from the tip of the projectile to the end of the casing. Now, I don't really care about that measurement because I can't really use it for a lot. What I can use is where the projectile meets the barrel or the ogive. So what I was talking to him about was how to find that ogive. And there are a number of different ways of doing it. The way I like to do it is I like to have a modified case, and I use such a device. This is a tool from Hornady, however you want to pronounce that. That is called a OAL gauge, or an AOL gauge, an overall length gauge. This device allows you to measure with, of course, the proper tools in the other end, allows you to measure how far out the projectile sticks into the barrel or the ogive. You can find your seating depth, or roughly find your seating depth, with a tool at the bench in your workshop, and you don't necessarily have to risk exploding your rifle finding your seating depth, or putting a stick down your barrel to find out how deep it's sat, or just shove a bullet in there, and that's not really going to give you a proper reading anyway, because you're shoving it into the barrel, and it's going to, well, the projectile is softer than the barrel, so that's going to give. So this, to me, is the best way to go. Why is it important to have the same ogive every time, or the same overall seating depth every time? That is a little bit a different video, but we can take it just quickly. You need to have the same seating depth every time to make sure that you maintain that same chamber pressure, and thereby maintain the same pressure inside the casing, the same burn rate, and so on, and thereby also maintain the same speed. Speed and having the same speed, or the SD, and as low an ES as possible, or standard deviation, and extreme spread is important, because as you have probably noticed on some shots, if you have ammunition that deviates, that ammunition will have a different height on target, especially when we get further out than, I would say, about 300 to 400 meters, or 300 to 400 yards, 430 yards, something like that. That really starts to have an effect, depending on the caliber. So what I like to do is I like to make a casing that goes on the end of this, so I can use this together with this and find my seating depth. You can buy these casings from Hornady. I'm not sure that they do a 223, because the inside diameter of the 223 casing is basically the same as the outside threading of this threading tool. Now, this threading tool is a 5/16 by 36. And if you don't have that in your inventory, you're going to have to get one, because that's the thread on the end of this thing right there. And that's what we're going to be doing now. So hold on to your lug nuts, boys, because it's time to use some tools. The way I do it is that, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to need some jaws, some kind of specific jaws. And I'm not talking about these jaws, I'm talking about these jaws. So vice jaws. And the vice jaws that I use for this have this geometry. They have a couple of milled out holes in there so that they can hold on to something round. The other side is just straight down the center. It also has a hole. I'll show you why that is relevant later. But to start out with, put your jaws in there, make sure that everything is square, everything's put down to the bottom. That doesn't feel right. All right, cool. Now you just clamp down on your casing. And of course, it's not easy to see what I'm doing, but I'm just putting this casing down where the corresponding milled out hole on the other side fits with the diameter of this casing. And I like to take it down to where the casing kind of is squeezed. Not on the thin brass parts that are on the casing walls, but the end of the casing right up here. So get that down into the clamping area. Make sure that everything is clamped down as it should be. Nice and tight like so. Now you put your drill, and this is a 7.3 millimeter drill. I don't know what that is in inches. And I'm in metric land, so frankly I don't really care. That is square. I need to go a little bit that way, a little bit that way. I don't have any fancy tools, so I'm just going to do this by eye. And just start drilling. Well, that sounds right. It's a good sound. And of course, never, ever, ever put your hands into remove that metal on the drill. I had a buddy of mine that did that once on a hydraulic drill press. And that hydraulic drill press did not care that his hand was there. It just kept going. All right. That was that. And that almost cost him his arm. I like to put that up in there while everything is still in that same spot, because then I know that I'm going to hit that same hole-ish. And then I like to use the drill press to get this started on the threading. I simply do that because then I know that the thread, or the start of the thread, is nice and square. You can just check that by rotating that, seeing that everything is on the same axis, right? Give that a little blow, make sure that all the metal is out of there. What I talked to you about earlier, that little geometry in the center, is important now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to clamp down on that like so. And what you can always do to make things go a little easier is give it a little bit of grease. Greasing stuff up before, lubing stuff up before shoving something in a hole is always a good idea. Don't get dirty. Now that goes in there. And with such a small hole, I like to keep everything free from the metal shavings. And you can do that by simply blowing the shavings through like so. Of course, you also blow away some of that lube that you put on there. Just put a little bit more lube on there. Just keep going. The reason why I'm blowing through there is because that I do not want to ruin the casing by it spinning in the jaws. So I want to remove all those shavings on the inside so they're not in the way of the tool doing its job. I definitely think that we're through. Just deburr that end just to make everything super smooth, super nice. So I do not cut myself when nobody else cuts themselves on a tool that I have made. Now that goes in there. That needs a blow. The reason why I want to blow that out is, of course, because if there is a little bit of residual dust in there, that's going to catch on the... Oh, that is smooth. Nice and straight, nice and square. Everything works just the way it should, and that goes through like that. Now this tool is ready to start measuring seating depths. This is not the right tool for that. This is for a 338. But the idea is that we now can take our tool here, put the end of the vernier caliper in there, and then measure the distance at where our flange meets the projectile. And that is mimicking where the rifle's barrel or the ogive is. So we can now measure roughly. We can now roughly measure how or where our ogive should be. And this is a tiny little bullet, or a tiny little casing. If you want to make this really sweet and really nice, you can polish up this this brass. It doesn't really need to be polished. It's ready to use as is. One thing that is really important is do not resize the casing before you make one of these. If you resize the casing before you make one of these, you're not going to be able to push the projectile up and down in there. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to take your projectile, shove that in there, and then be able to have it move up and down and in and out. What I like to do to get it to do that is I like to sit with a projectile in the couch one evening, just going back and forth. So that's how I would do it. This is how I would recommend doing it. And now I can get a nice, precise measurement on, well, on where my ogive for this caliber would be. And I can set that up in my press. So that was all for how to make a modified case. Right. So remember to share, remember to like, and most importantly, remember to subscribe. I really need more subscribers so I can keep getting cool stuff and giving you cool videos. So hopefully you've enjoyed this one. It's a little bit long, but I do feel that all the information in it is relevant. So leave a subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me how you do your ogive measurements. Do you have a different way of doing it? Do you have a better way of doing it? Please let me know. We're always in the game of helping each other improve so we can all become better shooters. So until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. I think that's in the bag. All right, cool. Blammo and Blammo and Blammo. That goes down there. This goes down there. Blammo. Right. So, like so.